This episode is brought to you by Modal Electronics, who enable you to play and perform powerful sound with their incredible synthesizers. You can enjoy vibrant wavetable patches with the Argon 8 series, or you can produce with state-of-the-art analog-style synth textures with the Cobalt 8 series. To check out Modal Electronics' incredible array of synthesizers, go to modalelectronics.com. Modal Electronics. Dare to sound different.
The music that I listened to probably in the car growing up. I remember being on school runs a lot, or being in the car. I used to go for these long walks with my dad and have the radio on. So I was really small. I was probably 4 or 5. And apparently I did start to write songs in the back of the car. So I think it was just the music that was being absorbed when I was really young.
And did you kind of think then, did any kind of personality of a musician, or did you get exposed to the sort of world of being like a pro, like pop or rock musician then, and think, oh, that sounds good? Or was it just the sound of the music?
It was definitely just the sound of the music. I didn't really go to concerts very much. I think the first concert I went to was I think it was a Christina Aguilera concert, maybe, when I was 12 or something. So when I was really young, I think it was just, I would just find the music that I love. And I remember my mum did have a big CD collection, and I would look through the CDs and find a cover that I really loved of a CD cover, and they'd be like, oh, I'll listen to this. And yeah.
And who would you say were kind of formative influences in terms of the first acts that you can remember of thinking were amazing?
So my mum listened to a lot of Motown music. So I loved Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks, Nina Simone, Whitney Houston, Roberta Flack, Leonard Cohen. I feel like my mum in particular, she's got great taste, great musical taste. So she always had the classic big, singer-songwriters. And so I think it was, the music that she was listening to, really.
Yeah, I mean, well, those are all some incredible artists, clearly very good taste. So when did you think that you wanted to do it professionally? How did it come about? Was it London Grammar formed and then you started taking it more and more seriously? Or was it, I know that I'm a great singer, or not even that, just I want to be a singer, even though you are a great singer, of course?
I wanted to be an actress, actually, when I was really young growing up, or when I was in my teens. And I was always writing songs and playing the piano. I was just quite a creative person. I wasn't very good at the other subjects at school. So it was something that I just always did, but there was never a moment. It was actually the pivotal moment in my life was meeting Dan, because I met Dan a year before I met Dot, but so before we actually became London Grammar. And he just has, this amazing ear and a vision. And he heard me sing and was no, you're actually really good. And I was like, oh, am I? And he was like, yeah, you're actually really good. And he was in another band at the time. This is quite a scandalous story, actually. He was actually in another band with some other friends at the time, and he basically left that band and started a new band with me, and which didn't go down very well at the time. And
I guess everybody's forgiven each other now.
Yeah, I think
it was
so.
For the best.
Yeah, I think so. But I had no idea that I still don't think I think I have imposter syndrome a bit. But he was like, no, you are a really good singer. We're gonna go and do a gig and write some songs together. And then it is really because of Dan, and actually Lara as well, his wife. He kind of has this A&R ear, and he's very proactive, and he met Dot a year later, and that's when we became
And in whereabouts was this for those people who don't know?
It was at university. So we went to the University of Nottingham. So we were all three of like Dot's from Northampton and me and Dan are from London. But we were at uni in halls, you know, just in those little rooms, jamming away.
What were you studying at uni?
English and art history.
And so did it cross your mind at all when you started that course? You know, when I come out of here, I'm going to be in a band and, you know, on my way to superstardom.
Definitely not the superstardom thing, which I still don't think we really have. No.
Well, superstardom is the wrong word. It's more like critical acclaim and a proper fan base. And, you know, I don't want to sound like a music snob, but like it is really refreshing to have really great albums being made.
Thank you. That really means a lot. Yeah. So I guess it kind of happened really naturally, actually. And I think every step of the way, I know my reaction. I think Dan actually was a bit more, and Dot. I think they'd always been in bands growing up. I think for them, they were a bit more like, yeah, this is just happening now. This is happening. This is what I was always destined to do. I don't know, maybe they would not say that, but I think they would more. For me, it felt a little bit more like, oh, okay, this is happening. And because we signed a record deal actually in our third year of university, we were going up and down to London, meeting with A&Rs and record labels, whilst we were doing our exams. And it all felt very surreal. And I think just it was so surreal that I just didn't really think anything would come of it. And it is amazing to be here, 10 years later, and still have people buying our records and stuff. It's like, that is all you could ever want as a musician.
And so did you guys start doing gigs first, or were you writing, or a bit of both? Like, did you play when you were at uni?
Oh yeah. We did like these like cover nights. So we would play for like all of our friends, and people would like come and see us play in Nottingham, basically. But it usually was, you know, all of our friends, really. I look back at that now and I think it's really amazing that they supported us so much, because like we were just singing covers at the first, and then tentatively our own songs at the beginning, and then we started to try and play gigs down in London. And that was all Dan. You know, he was like, I've done loads of research and these are the places that we need to play. Like, this is where you know, Ed Sheeran played a gig, you know, Ed Sheeran. And I'd be like, yeah, Ed Sheeran, yeah. And he'd be like, yeah. Well, he played this gig here in this pub. So like, we need to go and play in this pub. And I'd be like, yeah, okay, fine. Let's, whatever you want. Yeah, that sounds good. So he was always the visionary in that sense. He kind of was the manager of the band, I think, really, before we had a manager. And
what were the covers that you played at uni?
Oh, some really good ones. So we did Sometimes I Feel I Throw My Hands Up in the Air. So we did that song. That was really terrible. We did that song and Florence then released it.
Wow. So it was before the Florence one?
Well, we were just covering it, and then she released it, and we were like, oh my God, that's so funny. And we would do lots of old songs that like I really love, like we'd do like Rolling Stones or just like big classics, and then we would do whatever was like in the chart, modern, you know, the modern stuff that was popular at the time.
And what were the gigs like when you went down to London, in terms of like did you feel like it was a good like live music scene, or you know, what was it like playing those sort of pubs? Because by the sounds of things, Ed Sheeran, for example, played a lot of like variable gigs before he made it. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting, actually. We played to no one. Like, no one was ever there. It was like literally like 5 people and maybe our mum and dad, like our parents watching, and that was it. Whereas what you hear about Ed Sheeran, which is I find very fascinating, is by the time I think he'd signed a record deal, I mean, these pubs would be packed. Like, he literally had a devoted you know, I think like thousands of fans already. He was like a ready-made star, basically. From what I have heard, I could be completely wrong. But with
Yeah,
us,
I've heard that. I heard he played like Cargo, which was, you know, sort of this club in Shoreditch. I mean, I don't know how the pandemic's treated it, but I could not imagine someone with a acoustic guitar being in that place. So I mean, he must have had people there.
I think that he, yeah, I mean, I think he's worked so hard, and that's why he deserves, you know, the superstardom that he has.
But was he a few years before you, though, in the sense that had the scene already kind of died even more? Because I'm imagining, you know, even if like the second coming of Aretha Franklin kind of showed up in one of, you know, those pubs like the Dublin Castle and all of that circuit, I don't think necessarily, because just no one goes to those type of places anymore. Was that the vibe?
I think that's really like a really good point. I wonder whether he was maybe one of the last kind of artists that I can really think of that I feel like built up a huge organic following of fans
through
live music in London. Yeah. So for us, we signed a record deal more actually off demos, really.
So what was the turning point that made you sign the record deal and kind of led to making that, you know, fantastic first album?
So there were actually two simultaneous things. There was one gig in a pub where suddenly there weren't 5 people there. There were about 100. And I do remember that, which isn't very many people, but still I was like, how come there are 100 people here? I was like, that's kind of mad. And there happened to be like an A&R in the crowd, and he actually heard us sound checking. He'd just been having a drink at the bar, and I basically started singing at the sound check, and he freaked out at the bar, and he did that classic A&R thing where he was just like, who are you? How much money do you need? Like, don't worry about money. Like, I'm an A&R. And me and Dan were like, oh my God, it's going to happen. And then, yeah, like that was part of it. And then simultaneously we had put a song online, and a guy called Ross Allen had found it, who then became our manager, along with another company. So through, you know, that A&R, a guy called Tom Graham and Ross Allen, we kind of then found management, and then eventually we signed a record deal to Ministry of Sound.
And in terms of like going into the studio to make If You Wait, was that like the first time that you've been in a recording studio?
Yeah. So we had done some stuff, like a friend of ours, a guy called Ben, worked in like a vocal recording studio, but for like voice acting, so not like a big music studio. But we would go in there and really try and record good vocals and stuff for our demos. But yeah, when we went into the studio to make If You Wait, that was the first time any of us had been in a studio at all. And we were really, really lucky with who we ended up working with.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, well, it was an amazing album and obviously a huge breakthrough. Were you expecting what happened to happen? Were you hoping for it and thinking, you know, we've made something really amazing here, so hopefully it gets heard? Or did it kind of completely stun you to the extent to which because it was being talked about for, well, all the way till Truth Is a Beautiful Thing, you know, people were, it's rare that you get like an album that lasts for that long in terms of people listening to it, talking about it, and obviously giving you time to make proper stuff. But were you expecting it?
No, like never, like not in a million years. I remember listening to Hey Now when it got mixed, when it had, you know, had its finished mixed and was mastered. And I do remember feeling like I really believe this song is really special. And I really thought that it should be the first song that we released. But I never thought that then like months later, it would be like being played on Triple J in Australia, and you know, just playing those concerts in front of thousands of people. Never thought that would happen. I was not prepared. I don't think.
And in terms of taking it from, you know, playing a pub with like just a few people in to playing in front of thousands, how did you find that experience? And when did that change? Was that after the first album, or kind of after you got signed?
So it was after, yeah. When we signed a record deal, we then did no gigs. I actually think we weren't really supposed to, I think, was kind of the thing. It was like we kind of went away to make the album, and so it was after the album was released. It was then like suddenly we were doing, gigs in front of 500 people, and then that very quickly was 5,000, and onwards and upwards from there. I think I was a very inexperienced performer, really, really inexperienced. So I definitely did struggle a little bit with that adjustment, which I know has been spoken about because I had terrible stage fright, which now I look back on, I think was probably just completely normal reaction, really.
Completely normal. It's got to be, in terms of it's such a quick adjustment.
Yeah.
And by the sounds of things, you'd been creative all the time, but it's not exactly like you were, only focused on becoming a singer. It's sort of, by the sounds of things, happened pretty organically. So would you say that stage fright is not something that you experience so much anymore?
I think I do get moments of it. I definitely feel much, much better than I was. It's slightly difficult to figure out what was really going on, because I do think, and I've spoken about this, a lot, that I think we overworked ourselves as well on the first album. And then I think if you overwork yourself, if your voice, I think it depends, what your voice can cope with, what kind of workload. I don't think that my voice can cope at all with, there are some bands that very famously can do like 27 gigs in a row, and they'll be exhausted, but the lead singer will still sound amazing and kind of croaky afterwards. And just for me, I don't have that kind of voice. And so I was under a lot of pressure, and my voice started to give way. And I think going on stage constantly in a state of battling vocal fatigue gave me a bit of a complex. Whereas now I've learned such an important lesson, which is like, I just know how many gigs I can do and what I can't do. And immediately that's helped the stage fright, because I'm like, well, if you go on feeling your best, then you don't have to worry about, kind of thing.
That's such an important point. And loads of people who listen to this podcast are kind of aspiring musicians, or already, on the path to being a musician. And it's like, taking care of your voice is so important. So did you change, and do you do things like vocal warm-ups and all of that, or is it a case of just making sure that you get your rest between shows?
So a mixture of the two things. I definitely went away and like I had some vocal lessons. I mean, the sound of my voice is kind of there. That's not going to really change, but definitely just learning how to warm up, warm down. Just understanding that you just can't talk after a gig, and everyone wants to talk to you after a gig, but you just have to be like, no, I can't. I'm just going to go to the hotel. And just learning how to take care of it, kind of thing.
Really? You can't talk after a gig just because if you've got a gig the next night or in a couple of days? What about in the morning? Can you talk throughout the day, or do you have to be pretty like, again?
It depends. So definitely right after a show, I actually physically cannot speak. I physically actually, if I then try to talk, my voice is coming out all squeaky and strange and very, very strained. If you then don't talk for like a couple of hours after a gig and then start talking, I notice a big difference even just from that couple of hours of rest. But if the workload's been huge, you shouldn't really talk for like a good 12 hours, which is really hard to do. But for me, it's just like a lifesaver. Yeah. But people think I'm really rude. That's the only thing that I think.
Who thinks? Can't you just avoid people, or is it just kind of like random people who happen to be like backstage or something like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, it depends on the gig, but there's a lot of backstage. Of course, there always is. I think people understand, of course. Just the odd person maybe probably thinks I'm rude if I'm just being very quiet. But
no, but there's nothing worse than going on stage. There can't be than going on stage and thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this vocally because it's so exposed. So it's completely
yeah.
So you've got a new album out, Californian Soil. How, like, again, you've taken a decent length of time to put it together. I know you've been putting out singles. Do you consciously, as a band, take a while over albums to make sure that they're up to the same kind of standard, or is it more a case of just not putting any pressure on it? When it's ready, it's ready?
I think it's both. I think this one especially, I felt like we just had nothing to lose. So I was like, however long it takes, whatever. I don't, you can't make good music under putting yourself under that kind of strain. So, but I will say that we do absolutely painstakingly kill ourselves over every single sound that goes on every single song. And we do really work so hard during that process. And we worked so hard on this album, especially, I think.
And where did you record it?
A lot of it was recorded in Dan's loft studio. So it was like a bedroom studio, essentially. I think on the second album, we tried, it's strange when you kind of have initial success. It's like, then we could go to all these big, expensive studios. And I think we realized like that doesn't always work for us as a band, I don't think. And
why is that?
I think it's to do with vulnerability. I think it really is to do with who you are. And for me, I work best being around just Dan and Dot, because I can make myself completely vulnerable with them and sing about my life and talk to them about my feelings. Like it is, it's so important to be able to do that. And I think they kind of feel the same way. I think that they can, easily feel starstruck sometimes by other people or their opinions. And sometimes historically, I think we just were too, I don't know, maybe not, nice isn't the wrong word, but just kind of,
no, I'm sure it is
our own opinion.
I'm sure it is the right way.
Yeah, we didn't believe in our own opinions sometimes. We're easily swayed. And I think when it's just the three of us, we tend to kind of find more of a direction. And it's just a really homely feel, like in Dan's house. He had just got a dog as well. So it was just the most amazing. It's like some of the best days of, my life really was recording that album. And
wow. Yeah. I mean, that's such an important point, again, for people listening who want to be musicians or are already trying, it's like going to those big studios is not the be all and end all. And what you said, it makes so much sense, being in a place where you can feel comfortable to be creative, because a lot of the time you walk into a big studio and you have engineers who've worked with big names, and as a result they sort of think that they're George Martin or Quincy Jones, and like there will be comments. And if you're new starting out and you've got a vision, and suddenly someone who's not even taken more than a couple of minutes to listen to your music, they can give you a bit of feedback, and you can be worrying about it all night. So I was wondering, did you have experiences like that initially, and is that why you've kind of, it's such a great example to set as well, to just be like, we're going to make it in a space that we feel comfortable. Did you kind of experience things like that? Because I've heard lots of horror stories.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that, because the people that I get obsessed with what they are thinking are the runners. So the kids who have like just started out, and they're like, working for free from a loco or something, and they're there like making tea. But I'm literally watching them the entire time. Like if they're just like completely bored and uninterested, and just like, you can just see it, I get really paranoid. And then when I see them, because they're like these like young, they know their shit, these kids, like they know exactly what's what. And if they then start like nodding along, or they're like, I can see they're into it, then I'm like, oh my God, okay, the assistant is like really into it. And then I feel happy. But you can't, that's great sometimes, but sometimes I think, if you're too permeable, which I think I am, I think it's better for us as a band to go away as a three, or even sometimes in pairs. I think that Dan and Dot even sometimes need to go and make a piece of music, just them two. You know, because then there's no one else's opinion other than your own. But yeah.
And what does the album, you know, it seems like you've written about things from a personal perspective. What would you say, like, if there are any kind of overriding themes to the album, what would they be?
I think for me, it's a lot about self-identity, but I've tried to kind of explore that in a universal way. Like, I'm always thinking about the human condition. So it's definitely my life experience, but I hope I've kind of told it in a way that then it's like, now it's not mine anymore. And it's, you know, whoever is listening, if hopefully they'll relate to it, kind of thing.
And in terms of like how long songs put together, does that vary like completely differently? Do you ever have moments where you write a song super quickly, or is it usually quite kind of considered and labored over?
It definitely changes. So there's a song on the third album that's one of my favorite songs that is called All My Love. And it's a really simple song. I remember just turning up at like Dan's house and just being like, oh, I've got this idea. It's just like a couple of chords. And we just recorded it that day. And there are even like the window is open when we were recording it, and there were birds singing outside, and you can hear the birds quite clearly on the song.
And they're yeah, because it's you assume that they're real, but I mean,
yeah,
they are real.
They are real. They were just outside, yeah. And I remember that just happened really quickly, and it's such a simple song. And Dan was like, "Oh, I'm just going to throw some guitar at the end," and he was I swear he didn't actually write that guitar part. Like, it just came out at the end of that song, and I don't know how he does that. Dot does the same thing on the piano. And then there was a little bit of a process where he kind of added some weird stuff in the background, some subconscious talking, you know, that kind of thing. We like doing things like that. And then there are other songs like Lord, It's a Feeling, where I think it took about 2 years to get that song right. Like, at one point it sounded like world music, at another point it was drum and bass, and then eventually it ended up with the version that it is. And that's where I find that Dot, in particular, those kind of songs, he has a lot to do with that part of the process where there's an initial idea, and you know, I'm like, I don't know where it should go, I'm really confused, and Dan doesn't really know, and then Dot will kind of start to steer the ship. And yeah, with that song, that was really important.
And how do you ever find it difficult to kind of work on a song for that long, or are you not somebody who sort of gets tired of things that you're working? I mean, presumably you couldn't be, otherwise you'd be finding the process of making an album quite difficult. So do you not mind kind of just perfecting things and just staying with a song?
Yeah, I don't mind it. You know, I really see that as being my job. Sometimes you do need to not listen to a song for a week. If you've hit a wall with it, then okay, maybe you need to take a break because you can't see the wood from the trees anymore. But I don't mind it. I think that's like, yeah, that is my job. So I love that. I think the only time maybe you start to get sick of your own songs is actually touring. Probably
really?
sometimes.
On tour?
Sometimes. I think if you're kind of tired and you're singing Strong for like the 3,000th time, and there are people crying in the front row, which is amazing, which is absolutely amazing. But maybe then sometimes I'm listening to the song in my head and I'm like, I'm so grateful that those people are having an emotional reaction, because to me, I'm like, this is the worst song I've ever heard. I've heard it so many times. I think this is terrible.
I mean, even the best songs, like, you know, a lot of people can't listen to their favorite songs because you do just hit a point where you can't hear something anymore. But obviously playing live is incredibly important. Do you have plans to get out there and play now that things are just about easing off?
Yeah, so we've got a tour at the end of this year, a UK tour that we kind of tentatively put in, you know, with all our fingers and toes crossed, but it's looking pretty good now. I think that actually they'll go ahead. So that's really exciting. And we're playing All Points East Festival, which is also, you know, really exciting. And an Australian and New Zealand tour next year as well, because things are looking good there. I think like a European tour might take a bit longer.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole Brexit thing, I think they're still working through all of that, but In terms of like, because musicians are so, no, I don't necessarily say reliant, but like, I mean, playing live is very important, let's say, for having a career in the music industry, and streaming doesn't seem to be a great way for many artists to sort of support themselves. What do you make of the whole ethos? Like, I think the CEO from Spotify was sort of saying, oh, well, if you want to get paid more on Spotify, just make more music. Is that a route that you would ever go down, considering that you kind of, you take a long time over your art and you do something that many musicians probably don't have the patience for, which is just to stick with a song over several years? Like, do you think it's a bit kind of reductive? Because even though these are short pieces of music, like they require a lot of labor.
It's such a difficult thing. I mean, I didn't know that person had said that. It takes so long to make art, and also you enter yourself into your art. And I know that we find that we are cyclical by nature. So if we make an album, we then have to take a lot of time to go and rejuvenate and find inspiration. I think all artists are different. I think there are some people that really can churn them out, and I think some people, who are winning at, have an incredible work ethic. I think they do, but something's not right about it for sure. I think that Spotify is, it's amazing. There's so much music available for so many people now, which I think is great. But
yeah, absolutely,
it does devalue something. And I think, when you're a musician, you can't live life on the road forever as well. That's another thing. So when that's your main income, because you're not, essentially because of streaming, I think that can be
you're not paid, more or less anything. Like, it's literally, you have to be streamed an unbelievable amount.
Yeah.
Being streamed millions is like, also after labels and all the rest of it take a cut, it's not even proper. It's not even a salary, really, like, from what I understand. So it's kind of a bit weird that the industry more or less accepts the fact that artists have to stay on the road forever. And do you think more people will start kind of saying something, or is it a catch-22? Because obviously you want the support of people like Spotify and Apple Music, and of course as consumers we all love it. So it's like such a catch-22. Do you feel that more people will say stuff about this, or is that catch-22 just too difficult?
I think people are saying stuff about it. What do I think? I think I would just really encourage, if you love an act, to go and buy the CD. And the only thing that actually does upset me a bit is that I think it can devalue art slightly, because I remember when I was young and I would, want to go and buy a CD, it was such a huge moment going and buying it and saving up for that CD and the booklet that you got. I mean, I remember how important the album covers were to me. And I think that has slightly changed now. And there is a bit of a pressure sometimes as well with streaming to fit into a kind of algorithm.
Yeah, the chorus first and the 3-minute song and all of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Really bad and really damaging for people who want to make art.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's funny you say that, because actually me and Dan got stopped in the street yesterday by a fan, and he was so complimentary, and it gave us so much hope. He was like, it's so nice that your level of artistry, or stuff like that, and it was really nice, but it is tough. Yeah, there is a pressure there for sure now to but the whole world's gone online. I mean, even Instagram now influences a huge amount of things, like playlisting and
what about TikTok? Is TikTok, does that play a big role in your guys' composition strategy?
It plays no part. No social media has played any part in our composition strategy. But we have a TikTok account, for sure. I mean,
you have to,
you kind of have to. I'm kind of amazed by TikTok and how quickly it's grown and how extraordinary it is. But it's definitely, it gets you out there, but I just think there's definitely a tension at the moment in between what really is art anymore and what is actually social media. And it's definitely, I think for a band like us, it's made things harder in some ways.
Do you sometimes struggle to get up in the morning or wind down for bed at night? I used to find it so difficult. I woke up with no sense of positivity and brightness. I was void of motivation and spirit. This changed completely when I started waking up with a Lumi body clock. These incredible devices mimic the light and colour of a real sunrise and sunset, transforming the experience of waking up and going to sleep completely. Rather than being suddenly woken up with an alarm clock, the Lumi body clock will wake you up gradually with a natural sunrise. The Lumi body clock has been shown to improve the quality of sleep and awakening and to boost mood and productivity in clinical trials. You can personalise your sunrise and sunset from 15 to 90 minutes with their clinically tested unique natural light and more than 20 sleep and wake sounds. We all deserve to sleep well and to wake up feeling fresh. So if you're finding this a challenge and you want to try a new approach, go to lumi.com. If you're enjoying the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, you can keep up to date with all of our latest episodes for free by subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button is located at the top of the Tom Cridland YouTube page. It's also at the bottom right of any video that you watch on YouTube. If you're listening on an audio platform, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe at the top of the page.